So, what's the first Stephen King adaptation you ever saw?
It's like I have to really think about it, but I think the first film that I ever saw was Cujo. That's the first one that at least
Hmm.
I remember. That's the first one that sticks out in my mind, and there's a lot of his stuff that I've never seen. I've never seen Maximum Overdrive. I've never seen Firestarter or some of those other films. But I remember Stephen King was like kind of a staple of sleepovers, and Cujo, Pet Cemetery. I remember seeing in a theater. It would be years later before I saw Carrie. Um, I don't know. I mean, Stephen King was always this fixture in American horror cinema, and it was something that it was weird because there was always that group of kids. It was interesting because about 7 or 8 years ago, when I was still teaching, or when I returned to teaching for a short while, I was in a middle school, and there was this girl, probably seventh or eighth grade, and she was kind of I don't know how you would describe her. Not quite goth, but leaning in that direction. I mean, the pancake makeup and the black liner was in her future, definitely. But she was reading It. And I looked at her and I just started laughing. And she said, "What?" And I said, that just takes me back. And she didn't understand what I meant, but what I meant was there was always some girl, usually a girl, around that age who was really into Stephen King. And I don't know. I don't know what the fascination is. The the bleakness of his writing, the despair in it, or the stories. And like I've said, I don't think I've ever read a Stephen King book outside of the first Dark Tower book. But
Mm.
King was never somebody that I drifted towards. I liked his movie. I liked some of the movies. But like with anything, anybody with that amount of product or productivity or whatever you want to call it, that level of output, there's going to be good, there's going to be bad, and the adaptations are going to be up and down. And I think back then, even then, I was such a movie snob that the bad ones didn't really resonate with me. You know what I mean? I drifted a little bit more towards the prestige ones. So when something like Stand By Me came out, I was really that's one that really grabbed a hold of me. When I finally saw Carrie, it really does. All it really comes down to is a director that you choose that has a vision. Brian De Palma, definitely, but also Rob Reiner. And for whatever the problems with both, for whatever personal problems I have with both The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, both of them are really well made. So Stephen King has this weird he has this weird place in cinema history for me, where it's, as I've gotten older, I've started to gain a more graduated respect for him.
That's cool.
What about you?
For me, it was I think it was Cujo as well,
Mhm.
because when I was like 6 or 7, my aunt had a Saint Bernard. Well, she had 2 Saint Bernards,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in the garage with the dogs. I don't know if I've ever told this story. Um, and I had been watching Richard Pryor. It was a Richard Pryor special, whatever was on,
Mhm.
like where they had it on the TV, and I was watching it, and so he was like, since he was so animated, I guess I got like animated also or whatever, and so I was like, I think I was teasing and pestering the dog, but I was playing, but the dog was just kind of like okay, stop.
Yeah.
And I didn't pick up on those cues. And so the dog fucking nipped my face.
Yeah.
And so basically the fang or whatever like went across above my temple, like on the corner of my head, and then the lower tooth kind of left a mark near my earlobe.
Yeah.
Like where the sideburn is. And so I started fucking screaming, and then the dog basically like knocked me down, and I was face down, and the dog's like kind of put its paw over me. And in hindsight, I think it was just basically treating me like a puppy or something
Yeah.
like that, and it was just kind of like fucking relax, like stop. But I don't know if it realized that it had like done damage, and if it did, maybe it was licking me. But I thought it was this like vicious attack, right? And I was fucking screaming, and I was bleeding everywhere, and I had to have 13 stitches, and I was at my aunt's, and my mom was on a trip, so my aunt was like babysitting me, but
You're
then my
doing a
mom
real
came
good job
home,
of it.
yeah, amazing.
Fuck.
Yeah, that's yeah, we're not gonna go into that dynamic. Because we want to keep a horror to the minimum for Halloween. So then my mom comes back, and at that point I was like, "Look, Mom, I look like Richard Ramirez."
Wow.
Because I was all bandaged up. Yeah, because that was me. So that night that when I went to go get stitches, the wallpaper at the ER, it was all dogs. And I understood irony. And then later, I remember this movie. I saw it on TV, and it was about this fucking dog, this like rabid dog. And I was like, oh fuck. But at the same time, I was like, I was afraid of dogs, and I was like, I wanted to like, I don't know if it was that I wanted to confront it or I don't know what, but I wanted to like see it. And so that was like after it was like, oh, Stephen King, and it's like, who's Stephen King? And Stephen King is a writer. Stephen King writes these books. Stephen King writes these horror books. And then it was like after that, it was probably like Children of the Corn and Silver Bullet. And Silver Bullet, I mean, from the sounds of it, it's a werewolf movie, right?
Yeah.
And we'll get into our memories of each of these kind of films, but from there it kind of went into it, and then it wasn't until then you get into like the heavy, the classics, the Carries, The Shining, all of that. But when I saw Needful Things,
Yeah.
and that was in that period that like that influential, just on a life level for me. That one just has like a special place in my heart because it's like it's Max von Sydow, the devil. He plays the devil. It's just at that age I fucking rented that movie over and over. That's the one Stephen King book that I've read like in its entirety. Except for his on writing book.
I've picked that one up. That one's sitting on my shelf. I'm preparing to, because at the very least, and this is a little bit of an off-road tangent, but there's a level of respect that I have for the man that he dedicates himself to writing. Whether you want to consider his writing lowbrow or high end or whatever you want to call it, the man is dedicated to the craft of writing. And he's prolific in a way that, I mean, I think he's talented. I think he's incredibly talented to be. you would be an asshole to try to deny him his place within the genre of horror or like adult stories or these tense psychodramas that he puts out, like Misery or Dolores Claiborne, or really really intense character studies. You'd be an asshole to try to deny him his place. And I think that book, there's probably some secrets in it. I'm looking at it right on the shelf right here. It's next to The War of Art, and so
okay,
yeah. So there's something about the man and his dedication to the craft that I really respect. And I think with someone not simply based on his success, I'm talking about his prolific writing career. His what?
His output.
Yeah, his output. I think that anybody who can dedicate themselves to that kind of discipline is someone that you can learn from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's you can't argue with that. So this is something that I struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
So I am one of those people that when I'm waiting for fall because I like the holiday season, and all the way from the end of fucking summer, and I hate summer, to and I hate the heat. All from that, all the way to the holidays, all through New Year and all that. That's my favorite time of the year. I'm not alone in that. But then there's this anticipation of coming towards Halloween as the beginning of that, and that the season and all that shit. And then we do kind of like our season or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I struggle with, and more so than with Christmas time or any of that, I feel like by the time Halloween is over, I feel like there's always a little bit of a sense of like it wasn't Halloween enough for me. I don't know what that means. It's just something that I notice every year. Some years more than others. So even when we're doing this, we pick these different movies, we're doing whatever, and I really want to get into the vibe of these films and into the anticipation of the season to feel it. And a lot of times we record these episodes a little bit, we're ahead of time. So we were like, all right, let's do something on Stephen King. Let's do something broad on Stephen King. And then and here and there and in the future we'll go deeper into. We've done Carrie, we've done The Shining, we've done Creepshow, we've done The Dead Zone.
We did Needful Things. Well, we talked about the Needful Things, in reference to the devil.
Yeah. So we've gone a little bit deeper, specific. We'll do that, but let's do something broad. So then we were looking around, we were digging around for what to watch. Let's watch a documentary. All right, let's watch a documentary. King on Screen. Recent, 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Crowdfunded and
2-year-old documentary on Stephen King about his career. And before we go into it, what's your first impression of the documentary?
Normally, I like this type of documentary, and I did enjoy watching this documentary. I like talking head pieces. I like artists talking about other artists. The problem with the documentary, though, was that I felt it was kind of I felt it was a half a documentary, because it's what you would call a hagiography, where it was just laying praise on Stephen King and everything that he is and everything that he does, without really getting into some of the faults of his writing and some of the problems with adapting him.
It's a good point.
You know what I mean? It just seemed like it was like a whole lot of praise. Yeah, so that was my thing. That was my thing. Like, I felt it was a documentary that was missing another side to it, and I think
They Val Kilmered him.
yeah, they did. And
If you don't know what that means, you're not a true listener, guys.
go back, put Val Kilmer into the search engine, you'll know what we're talking about. Yeah,
yeah, just make it up. Take a wild guess.
Yeah.
Val Kilmer did his own documentary about himself and about how Val Kilmer is Val Kilmer, and
the greatest Val Kilmer that has ever lived. Yeah,
there's only one.
Yeah.
It's a talking head love letter to Stephen King.
Yeah.
Where filmmakers talk about how much more than a horror writer Stephen King is, which I agree with.
Oh yeah, I definitely do.
At the same time, I think the exception proves the rule. Stephen King is more than a horror writer, but he's also a horror writer. He's a horror writer who is more than a horror writer. And again, being that person, and I recognize this in myself, that for whatever reason I have this fucking like FOMO fucking Halloween fear of missing out. It's like this falls into that area where it's like, well, this isn't Halloween enough for what I want for this season right now that we're talking about Stephen King.
Yeah.
There will come a time where we'll do Shawshank or we'll do something like that where we can come back to some of the points that they made in this film, because I think they're going to be appropriate to looking at Stephen King outside of the horror genre, of the horror world, and to say, yeah, like he is about horror as the experience, as people's shared experience of horror, and that can be put inside of a prison, because that is a horrific environment. And King is representative of horror as these things that happen in small town middle America. And that doesn't have to be ghosts and goblins and ghouls and fucking like killers and killer dogs or killer cars. Certainly. It goes into the, small town horror is what's being fucking, they're talking about fucking these, whether they're calling them locusts or just immigrants that are eating people's fucking cats and dogs in a small town in Ohio, and they're creating a horror story out of that. But Stephen King's Dead Zone has a politician fucking who's a slime ball, who played by Martin Sheen, who is another version of a monster. So there is all that. For our purposes, I want to go beyond Frank Darabont's sentimentality. He directed Shawshank, The Green Mile, and he's directed and been involved. Yeah, The Mist. He's been involved in other like horror proper stuff. I think he was involved with Walking Dead, like
I think he was a show. I don't know if he was a showrunner, but he was an executive producer on, I think, the first or the first two seasons. I can't remember. He got pushed out.
He was involved with
there's politics behind
it. Nightmare on Elm Street, one of them.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Oh, no. Yes. So. You're talking about during his younger writing days. I think he did The Dream Child. I think he was involved in that one.
Right. Yeah, because he's he's featured in that other Talking Head thing.
Yeah.
So definitely, Stephen King is he can venture outside of the box of horror. He is an American writer. I think that's the best way to describe him as an American writer. But for our purposes here, he's fucking horror. It's just
well, I think even with his more subdued works, something like a character study like Dolores Claiborne. I mean, that's a realistic horror. That's a film about domestic violence, incest. That's featuring Kathy Bates, Jennifer Jason Lee. Is that her name? No. What the fuck is her name? I love her too.
The one from that film.
The one from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Jennifer Jason Lee.
Jennifer Jason Lee.
Okay, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Vic Morrow's daughter, I think. That's true horror.
That's the Taylor Hackford film.
That's the Taylor Hackford film. That's a true horror film because it's about the realistic horrors of life. You know, a fucking clown that comes to life, or a rabid dog, or a girl with telekinesis, and you know, a religious upbringing. That is, all of that shit is exaggerated and heightened horror that exists in our world. Dolores Claiborne is probably his most realistic and down to earth, very human story, where it's, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's got a great performance by both Jennifer Jason Lee as the daughter, Kathy Bates as Dolores Claiborne, the abused wife, and David Strathairn as the abusive husband. It's a very good film. It's a lot better than its reputation, and it's maybe not its reputation, but it's a lot better than how little it's been embraced, and how little and I think because it was such a more human based and more realistic human story, it failed at the box office because it didn't have that mystical aspect of it. It didn't have that aspect that was like, you know, otherworldly. It wasn't
Supernatural.
Yeah, the supernatural, which is, you know, sadly, Stephen King could find himself writing himself into a corner as far as people's expectations. That's not his fault. That's the public's limitation in recognizing him as an artist. But to his credit, there was a time when he branched off and he created an alter ego, Richard Bachman, who I think is the author of a lot more of his more human. I don't know if Stephen King wrote The Body, which Stand By Me is based on. I think Richard Bachman might have wrote that. So it's a
Which
way.
That's cool too.
Yeah. I mean, that's authors have done that. Donald Westlake created Richard Stark to do that. So yeah.
And sometimes that's for contractual reasons.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's, you know, the artist formerly known as Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's, and I don't know specifically about his career, but in terms of that, but sometimes it's also just Maynard James Keenan from Tool is also Maynard James Keenan from Pussifer and Perfect Circle, and it's just like in between. Tool takes a lot. The band, they're like a progressive. I guess you'd be called like progressive metal or something, or in that realm. So very complex time signatures, very complex music. So the musicians, the instrumentalists work for long periods of time on their shit, and then they present him like music, and then he adds the melodies and the lyrics and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And in between that, he wants to work on other shit, including winemaking. So he's like, I still need to get this out. So I mean, for writers, a lot of times it's like, you know, like you something is like just gestating, and while that's working, another thing starts to emerge, starts to sprout, and it's like, well, let me start working on this. And sometimes another project will be, the process will be that much faster.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it's just kind of like, oh, this is a different perspective though. This is a different thing. You have a conversation with one person, it's going to be totally different than a conversation with anyone else, obviously, but in multiple different ways, in terms of fulfillment, collaboration, whatever. In that sense, it's like you're collaborating with a different element of your own psyche. therefore it's a different persona, it's a different character, a different alter ego. And so Stephen King has also, I mean, we all become this persona. And whether you're writing yourself into a corner the way you're talking about, or it's also like you're writing into that person, you're developing that Stephen King style.
Mm-hmm.
So that ultimately you can get to the point where, and I have one of those, that Dark Tower, and where he gets super meta. And I know we have listeners who are like, some more than others, like super into Stephen King. And I have a good friend who's like gone on that fucking Dark Tower journey where it's like all these references to other shit, and it's like the world within the world, and kind of like the opening, the little creative opening that they do in this documentary, where it's this woman passing through fucking Castle Rock or whatever the fuck, and or whatever town, and there are elements of these different films popping up as like Easter eggs throughout. But in the Easter eggs of our memory, let's go through some of these. Let's trick or treat along these fucking different films.
Sure.
Carrie, the fucking we talked about it, but it's like that's the classic. That's the De Palma doing his Woman in Trouble, Hitchcock, slash fucking revenge tale with jump scares.
But also a lot of the technical things.
Adolescent sexuality. Yeah. Technical, yeah.
You know, the split screen, the diopter lens. I mean,
yeah.
De Palma was really making a name for himself as far as a flashy filmmaker, and that's a dangerous place to go, because anything that brings attention to the style in which you're doing begins to override the story. De Palma somehow is able to make that intricate to the story and helps it move everything along. I'm not as big an admirer of De Palma as your diehard De Palma fans, but I do really like a lot of the shit that he does, and his is one of the great talking head documentaries, because it's a man that is so completely full of himself, you know. Yeah. he's artistic about it, and I dig that in a way that is completely different from Robert Evans talking about himself. These guys are so much fucking fun to listen to when they're talking about their favorite subject. You know,
we decided to make a picture, baby, and we made it. God, did we make it?
Well, you know, I could smell the spaghetti, so I mean, maybe it was. Maybe it was the right thing. I don't know. Fuck.
Yeah, I mean, it's fucking cool that like I like, and this comes up in the documentary where they're talking about how there's the gospel of Stephen King, and if you don't do that, then it's like obviously Stephen King is going to be like, well, I hate The Shining because it's not what I wrote,
which I think is a fair. I think it's a fair judgment on his part. If something, but it's also important to note that when there could be throw-off books. I think Cujo is a throw-off book. Actually, Cujo is weird because he doesn't even remember writing that book. He was so high on coke and drunk. Yeah, he was high. Yeah, he was fucked up. He doesn't remember writing that book. He doesn't remember any of it.
He was frothing at the mouth at that point.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. That was the metaphor is very strong. He's a writer that uses metaphor beautifully, in that all of these things are overpowering emotions and out of control behavior that manifest themselves in his fiction work. Now, The Shining, I think it's fair, and I think The Shining is a brilliant film with great performances all around. But if you listen to his argument, The Shining is a piece of shit because it doesn't do what. I agree with his assessment of the film. That's not the film that he wrote, and it's a lot of flash. It's a lot of it doesn't get to the core. Yeah, it's style. It doesn't get to the core of a man fighting his alcoholism. And it is true. I'm not sure who said it. Maybe it was Mick Garris, I think the director of the Shining TV miniseries, who said when you cast Jack Nicholson's already crazy at the beginning of that movie. So it's not a slow descent into madness. Yeah. It's a heightened sense of madness, you know?
And because of that, the critique is there is no change in the character. Yeah, you miss the, I don't know who says it, but yeah, the main critique of that, which I think is valid, is that you don't get the horror of watching this person that you love change into someone else before your eyes.
Yeah.
And and now this person who you love has become a monster, and now you have to escape this monster this person you're sharing this family, creating this family with or whatever. Now this person is out to destroy you, to kill everything. That's that. But then you have Kubrick, who will call you up at 4 a.m. and say, I don't care, and then hang up. You know, I mean, and not that he did that, but like he's that person who did call Stephen King and said like this God exists or whatever, or whoever he called, and you've described him as and that's kind of like the tag that he has. He's like more of a cold, analytical director, and he's very cerebral and very very technical. And I mean, I'm of the Oscar Wilde school that is like, well, style is substance, because it's built in.
Yeah.
And if you think that you're doing substance without style, your lack of style is also, to mix my metaphors and to mix my shit is like, that's also like, the message that's in the medium, you know what I mean? To take a page out of McLuhan, but I like when Stephen King. I like both sides of it. I like on the one hand when Stephen King is interpreted by these bold, big directors who can really leave their mark, whether it's true to Stephen King or not. So you have these Carries, you have The Shining. Those are two probably the biggest ones. Misery is a good film. It just doesn't have that same kind of Carrie and The Shining these are two stylists.
Yeah.
Doing that work. More beyond just filmmaking, they're stylists. Once you get into Creepshow, it's the vibe. And that's kind of like when you watch a Stephen King film and you're not saying, necessarily like, this is one of like my favorite Taylor Hackford films or whatever, because Taylor Hackford is not necessarily like a stylist.
He's an everyman director. He's a, what do you call it?
Yeah.
He's like he would have went to the trade school of filmmaking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where we
would have gone. Yeah.
Yeah. When you have true auteurs like Spielberg, Scorsese, Coppola, Kurosawa, Bergman, more personal filmmakers, Taylor Hackford is he's a get the job done kind of director.
We're making a movie.
Yeah.
Those are the guys that you watch one of their films that is based on a Stephen King story, and it's like, well, that's a Stephen King movie. You know what I mean? Like, because because Stephen King, whether they deviate from the material or not, or however much they do or don't deviate from the material, it's Stephen King comes through more.
Yeah.
Because the director comes through less. So with a Romero, that's like a collaboration with Stephen King. and that's like classic early 80s. Just it gives you that feel. It gives you that Halloween feel. That's one of the ones that it's like, regardless of how scary or bloody they may be, it's kind of like one year we should talk about. We should do some episodes on fucking Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah.
Because it's silly. There's it's that adjacent, that kind of like horror comedy, and then camp is on the other side of the fence. You know what I mean?
That's the interesting thing about that. With both Creepshow and Tales from the Crypt. Tales from the Crypt and Creepshow are both they're both embellishments of early 60s, 50s comic books, right? I mean, there was a comic book for Tales from the Crypt, and Creepshow is based on I think Creepshow, one of them was based on, I get all this mixed up. Creepshow, Tales from the Dark Side, Tales from the Crypt, all come out of something that was the original Mad magazine, which was Tales Calculated to Drive You Mad. The old EC comics, the old William M. Gaines comics. And I'm not an authority on this, so I might be mixing up all kinds of shit, but I think it's obvious that they all blend into each other, and they influence in the same way that the old RKO serials influenced Lucas and Spielberg when they were making Indiana Jones. You have these comic books that captivated young minds, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old kids. And because if you look at Creepshow, Creepshow is unlike, if you really look at it, it's unlike anything that Romero or Stephen King really do. But what it feels like, now that I think about it, is it's them having fun as adult little kids. Those are adaptations of comic books. And they're stylized in the way that Romero and Stephen King are both capable of, but they're not typical of either of their filmographies or either of their. Watch it again and think about it. Father's Day, the E.G. Marshall with the cockroaches, the Jodie episode that Stephen King is in, that crate that kills Adrienne Barbeau. None of those really fit into the filmographies of either of these two men, and yet they're very much, the fingerprints are all over it stylistically, So I mean, because when you think of Romero, you think political statements, you think about social statements, you think of the civil rights with Night of the Living Dead, the military industrial complex with Day of the Dead, consumerism, with Stephen King, you're looking at demons, personal demons, which are usually, bad childhood abuse, but also alcoholism and drug abuse. If a lot of his shit is basically that, the outsider struggling to survive in a world where they're not accepted, loved, or even tolerated. That's a lot of his work, at least as far as I can see. Yeah.
Did you see Christine?
Yeah, that's a great nerd
fucking Carpenter
coming up. Yeah, isn't it? Carpenter. I mean, Carpenter doing that. Yeah, utilizing the widescreen, doing his Carpenter thing, the darkness. I mean, I think I really would have liked to see Carpenter do more Stephen King, but Christine is a very basic, almost moronic story. The idea of a car coming to life, but they both make it work. Car. Yeah, a jealous car that plays 50s rock and roll. It's just, but it's great, isn't it? Isn't it just so? I mean, but that's the talent of a great director, and my heart on for John Carpenter and my admiration for everything that he does. I mean, even when Carpenter's not good, like In the Mouth of Madness, he still has moments that are just head and shoulders above everybody else. I would have loved to have seen those two collaborate again. It would have been really great.
Yeah, that's one that I want to do at some point. That'll be cool. Do
Christine,
Christine.
yeah, we
Oh,
should.
yeah, yeah. Cujo, the fucking it's like Jaws, but it's a dog.
Yeah.
Um, but not,
Mhm.
Dead Zone. We talked about the horrors of this person with these visions and the PTSD and all that.
But do you think that,
It's like
like the PTSD and the visions that he has, do you think it's just as I sit, the Dead Zone takes on a lot more weight over these past, what is it, 8
the Trump
years?
years.
Yeah, well, 8 or 9,
Yeah,
exactly. And I'm starting to realize that the visions, the visions that
that's
he's,
Cronenberg.
well, yeah, it is Cronenberg. It's Cronenberg directed, but it's a Stephen King novel. It's a Stephen
Yeah, of
King,
course. Yeah,
basis.
but I'm just saying, yeah,
The-
it adds that.
yeah, and yeah,
That
you add
psychology.
Cronenberg to it. Um, what I'm thinking though is that with the Dead Zone, I get this feeling now that it's not so much that Christopher Walken has visions, is that Christopher Walken is the only one that sees the reality of what's going on.
Yeah,
And I think each one of us who, like when my mom asked me if I was going to vote for Joe Biden, I said, I'm not voting for Joe Biden. I'm voting against Donald Trump. It could be a fucking brain floating in a jar of blue liquid. I would vote for that before I'd vote for fucking Donald Trump. Donald Trump.
absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because it's like, what's that Futurama where they got Nixon's head in a bottle? I'd probably vote for Nixon's head in a bottle before I'd vote for fucking Donald Trump. And but it's not simply out of hatred for Donald Trump. It's a recognition of what a lying, cheating scumbag he is. And it's you do feel like, how am I the
and
only
what he
one that sees
represents,
this? What's that?
and what he represents.
And what he represents. But it's like, how am I the only one that sees that? I'm not the only one that sees it, fortunately. The problem is not enough see it. So it's almost like they live. It's like, I'm the only one wearing the fucking glasses, and I can't find anybody else who's wearing those glasses. They're out there. Somebody's making those glasses. Somebody knows the shit is going down. And with the Dead Zone, I think it's just like people are sheep, and they don't want to know, and they don't want to think about it, and they don't want to believe it. But Christopher Walken's character can't help but see it. So
Yeah,
that's the relatable. I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly, because it makes sense
no,
in
you
my
are.
head.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's
does.
like, yeah,
It
we
does.
get it. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and there's also the aspect of like I see the Dead Zone, and I'm like, this is what would have happened in the Deer Hunter had he lived,
yeah,
had he come back. You know what I mean? Like, obviously in that story it's a car accident. In our American story it's a train wreck.
yeah.
But it's it's an interesting film, and yeah, within the context of our current political situation, which everything looks fucking more horrible and everything fucking applies, like because like we haven't even done Back to the Future, which is the most obvious fucking like Trump fucking inspired
Yeah.
shit, but like yeah. And Children of the Corn, fucking Malachi, that's fucking another version of that. You know what I
See,
mean? Like,
Did you see Children of the Corn?
yeah,
I remember seeing it, but I don't. It was a movie that freaked me out, and I didn't watch it completely because those kids freaked me out. They
yeah,
fucking freaked me out, and I'm going to say something that's going to be taken. I don't know if it can be taken any way but the wrong way. It is a horrible thing to say, but I grew up in Phoenix. Mesa's not too far from here, and Mesa is a huge Mormon community. I always got the impression that that's what they were. I know that's unfair, but that's when I saw Children of the Corn, I thought that's what I didn't want to go to Mesa because that's what I thought it was. Now I know it's
Mm.
not, but you know, it says something about the tribalism of fear and how you only feel comfortable around the common, what you know, my neighborhood, my growing up experience. So the idea that that temple was out there and these guys in their black slacks and white t-shirts, not white t-shirts, white button-up short sleeve shirts, are riding bikes and proselytizing and trying to get you to understand that there
Yeah,
was
it was
another
like,
book, that there was another story of Jesus's life.
yeah,
That movie, I don't remember if that movie even goes that far. It goes even further, I think, but that's what I imagined. I know how fucked up that is, but that's what I am. Mormon scared the shit out of me. I guess that's the point that I'm trying to make here. Unjustly, but
well, I
yeah.
mean, it's the your perception
Hmm.
of those people over there that in this case happen to be Mormons. That's what scared the fuck out of
Yeah.
them. And then them riding around like looking like Michael Douglas from Falling Down, like that didn't help, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
And I did, there was a
so
part of me that was like, why are they coming into this neighborhood? These are some weird white people. This is weird. They're strange.
yeah, I mean, it's that that's another one that we could look. And again, any fucking like, there are a lot of Trumpian metaphors. You know what I mean? Like there are a lot of fucking
Yeah.
that outlet has like a lot of plugs that can be put into it. But a child preacher,
Yeah.
like taking over having this little group of kids, you know what I mean? Like doing his missions, you know what I mean? Like, in this farm community in the Midwest, um, is interesting, and that it's an ageist thing, you know what I mean? And there's a lot there, and it's creepy and it's cool. And one thing that I thought was interesting about the documentary before we move on is and I had mixed feelings about it, was that like some of these directors of the remakes they're
Mhm.
like, I loved the original so much, and I'm thinking like, so you wanted to fucking like redo it, like.
Yeah.
But other aspects of the film are, I mean, and I get it, because it's like on the one hand seemed like a contradiction, but on one hand it was like there were directors who said, well, this version of that story is not true to Stephen King. I want to do a version that's true to Stephen King. So there's that. And then they're like, and then I wanted to change the ending because I had to, because it's a film. So I wanted to be, and that's fine, because it's a contradiction that like makes sense, right? Then there were some that weren't really explored, where it's just kind of like, it becomes more of like a fan fiction type of shit, or like it's like it almost becomes like a cover band type of thing. And not even in the fucking Led Zeppelin, I'm gonna steal it and make it my own, kind of way.
Yeah.
It's just like, I just love that film so much. I had to remake it. And I don't know if that's just like, okay, well now we're gonna, Alien Romulus like kind of thing, where it's like, well,
Yeah.
I want to introduce a new chapter to new audiences, to a new generation, and I want to be like a gateway drug to the originals, like kind of thing. I don't know. Did you see Silver Bullet?
Never saw Silver Bullet.
Silver Bullet is Corey Haim,
Mm-hmm.
Gary Busey,
Yeah.
werewolves. Take that and fucking run with it.
That's one that I want to see. I mean, the Gary Busey, and
Yes.
that comes with age, knowing that Gary Busey is in. To watch a Gary Busey movie now is kind of pointless. But there was a time when Gary Busey was just crazy enough. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where he was just like, he was what do they call it? A functional alcoholic. He was a functional insane human being. He could get through it, and this is all before the motorcycle accident. There's something about Busey that, and I've met Busey. I've looked into those fucking eyes. I've seen the back of his skull. It's crazy. He's not right. But you watch him in some of those old movies, the Buddy Holly story, Point Break, the Lethal Weapon, and I imagine Silver Bullet is a better movie because of Gary Busey's contribution to it. You've seen it though. You can tell me, right?
I have seen it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what's
yeah? I
your
mean,
opinion?
it's a fun werewolf movie where fucking Gary Busey's the uncle, like the fun uncle,
Mm-hmm.
and you get to werewolf movies are about the fucking makeup.
Yeah.
Among other things, and so I always like to, there's a part of me that likes, there's different types of horror films that you like for different reasons, and then like I like the aesthetic of the typically that comes with like maybe a vampire thing because it's candles, it's fucking like velvet, it's fucking like there's more like of a sensual vibe to it. But I also like fucking I like the werewolf makeup, and that's because I liked Thriller. But I like these big fucking crazy looking werewolves, and I'm not sure who did the makeup for that one. But you have your prime candidates for who could have done it and the transformations and all, and then probably
at that time it's not difficult to. It's not really
right.
difficult to go through the list of guys that it could have been at that time.
And if it wasn't those guys, it was someone who worked with them or a student of them or an admirer of them. So you know what I mean? Like, so I haven't seen it. I think I saw some of it. Like Leslie and I had started to watch it a couple years back, and I don't think we got. For some reason, I think we had to like turn it off, or I don't know what came up or whatever. But yeah, it's something I'd want to revisit just for fun. And again, like in hindsight, like you think about fucking Corey Haim, like that fucking shit, like and it just adds layers of like, damn, So, Mac, did you ever see Maximum Overdrive?
You know what? I was just thinking about that because we were talking about a car coming to life, and Maximum Overdrive is all of the what do you call it? Machines coming to life, and that's the only film that King actually directed. He directed that film, and I hear it's horrible. I hear it's bad on a cult status type of Ed Wood type of bad. So I'm interested in seeing it on that end. I can get it. I can find it. I
saw it.
Yeah.
I know I've seen it, but I don't really remember it.
Maybe that's a bad. Maybe that tells you more than anything else you need. All I know, all I know is it's got a great AC/DC soundtrack. AC/DC did. I think Who Made Who is on that movie.
Oh, see, I don't even remember that.
Yeah.
I know
AC/DC.
that song. Yeah. Oh wow. Okay. Mm-hmm. I know I've seen it, but I mean, I could end up watching it. I'm like, no, I haven't seen the shit. Yeah. Creepshow 2. Did you see that?
I love Creepshow 2. I think Thanks for the Ride, Lady is one. We were saying that shit for fucking years after that. Thanks for the Ride, Lady, and I think that was before that. I think that was before the woman hit that guy and got him lodged in her windshield. Remember that story?
That was like late 90s, right? No, I mean late 80s, right? Early 90s?
Creepshow 2 was early 90s, 91, 92, I think, because Creepshow was in the late 80s. Creepshow was like 85, 84, like 85. 83? So Creepshow 2 was like 87 or 88. 83. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But then that woman ran over the man and got him lodged in her fucking windshield and left him in her garage. And that happened in late 90s, early 2000s, somewhere around there.
Was it that late? I don't know.
I know it was after that movie. And I remember when it happened, we heard the story. That's all my dad was talking about. Thanks for the ride, lady.
Yeah.
Thanks for the ride, lady. And there was that. There was George Kennedy with the Wooden Indian. And I think there were 2 other episodes, but I don't remember. I don't recall. I have the movie sitting on my shelf. I gotta. One of the good things about this documentary is that it makes me want to look into certain films that I don't know. 1922, I've never seen. I want to see that. I want to finally sit down for Gerald's Game. That's on Netflix. And there are certain things like Thinner that I don't really give a shit about, but there are some things that are like, wow, I want to dive into. I didn't even know that there were this many projects that had been made out of his film, out of his books.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's, because we're barely getting into the area where I haven't seen the films.
Mm-hmm. So wait a minute, let's go. I'm sorry, I interrupted. Creep Show 2. What were your memories?
That one is not as clear to me. It's another one that I've seen it. I just don't have like vivid memories of like I'm saying, like I have more memories of all of the ones that we've talked about up to this point.
Yeah.
And beyond that, like I guess his, like, once you get into like the Running Man, like the sci-fi type stuff, that I love the the score for Running Man. I want to do Running Man for multiple reasons.
Is that Hans Zimmer? Point. Who is that? That's
Jerry Goldsmith.
Okay, Jerry Goldsmith. Alien. Okay.
If I remember correctly, it's Jerry Goldsmith.
Okay.
Who I think also did like Basic Instinct. And, I mean, he's done so much, but like he's one that I always like. I noticed that I connect with that bed that he creates on a different level. Pet Cemetery, classic. That's kind of like once you get, that's me starting to get out of the area of shit that I've seen.
Yeah.
Pet Cemetery is a classic that I want to get back to. Misery we talked about. That one's a classic. Needful Things. It's got a great fucking cast.
Oh, brilliant cast.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about it. Ed Harris, Bonnie Bedelia, Von Sydow, and J.T. Walsh.
Exactly.
Very underrated J.T. Walsh. Yeah. You know what? We ought to do an episode just on J.T. Walsh. I mean, just talk character actors. Strother Martin, J.T. Walsh, Warren Oates. These are guys that really stand out as far as what they do. That they do the heavy lifting. They make these movies sometimes.
But like these movies like Graveyard Shift, I don't know. I think I saw Dark Half, but I don't remember it.
That's a George Romero. I've never seen that. Salem's Lot is sitting on my shelf. I've never seen that. That's him and Toby Hooper.
We talked about Salem's Lot when we did the...
Yeah. No, you talked about it, and I listened because I haven't seen it. Because,
Firestarter I've seen. We skipped that one. That's Drew Barrymore and George C. Scott. That one's also of that, like, just kind of classic Stephen Hick, just that vibe.
But I'd be willing to watch Firestarter just to watch George C. Scott drunkenly slumming. Because I imagine he was slumming and I imagine he was drunk.
Yeah. George C. Scott's always mad, you know?
He's always, and that's why he's the best. That's why you love him. I love George C. Scott, especially. Knowing the shit that he put Paul Schrader through during Hardcore makes that movie even better for me. And I think it's a good movie. But it's weird. The actors, directors and such, and their personality and what you imagine was happening behind the camera during the making of those films just kind of elevates certain films.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Sleepwalkers, it's kind of like been on my list to watch.
Who's in it?
I have no fucking idea. All
Yeah.
I know is that it's about these creatures that
No, it's about
cats.
cats, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, cats can fucking if you're one of those creatures that don't like you, like or I'll say they like you even less than they like other
Yeah.
living beings.
Yeah.
And and so I want to watch it with Liz.
I thought you were going to try to make some
like,
kind of fucking excuse for cats, and it's just kind of misunderstood in his take. No, motherfucker, cats. Those are cats.
I mean, I'm basically a cat in human form.
Yeah.
So, so there's that.
Yeah.
But I want to watch it with Leslie just for that, just so I can laugh, just for that aspect of it. I know she's gonna be like, "Are fucking cats harmed in this film?" Like, obviously not in real life, but like, I don't know. I haven't seen it, but I haven't seen that one. I haven't seen like Thinner. I haven't seen. Once he got into like The Mist, I haven't seen. I don't know those films. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know Dark Tower. I don't know.
Dark Tower was
The Mangler.
it was a great loss. I mean, McConaughey and Idris Elba, and both of them are very good in the film, but it was dumbed down because they were trying to go for some kind of franchise that diluted the work. They were Disneyfying it, and I could tell watching it that it was not the movie that it should have been. And after reading the book, I realized, yeah, this was, and I don't think the first book is really that dark, but it's a lot darker than what was on that screen. And I think when you water down source material in that way, you rob it of whatever success it's going to eventually have. Now, there is something to be said about, going your own way with it, with like Kubrick did with The Shining, but or even to some degree, the changes that Tarantino made with Rum Punch into Jackie Brown, but this was this betrayed whatever the book and the series was supposed to be. So yeah, that's a fucking shame, because you had a lot of elements there that could have made it a hell of a franchise. And I think if an audience deserves anybody as a hero that we could follow along on a path, Idris Elba is one of those guys that I would love to have seen a series based on him, on him playing that character. It would have been great. But
with McConaughey villain, right?
Yeah, with McConaughey as the villain.
Yeah, which is, I mean, he's a good Killer Joe kind of.
He is. He's got exactly what a villain needs. He has a certain dangerous charm that jumps off the screen, and Idris Elba, he has that dangerous charm, but he also has a heroic. He's one of the few guys that I said, if they're brave enough and they go with a black Bond, he'd be the guy. I could have.
Well, yeah, I mean, this was a conversation that two people that I know had, and one was like, basically like James Bond's not black. And the other was like, she was like, what did she say? She said, James Bond is a vibe, not a look.
He's also fucking imaginary, but anyway.
But I mean,
yeah, no, I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
But let that sink in. Like, James Bond is a vibe, not a look. And it was just kind of like, yes, and it would have been. He'd be a great James Bond.
He would have been a great James Bond.
And it would have been a great way to reboot, to pivot in the same way that Daniel Craig was. And because Daniel Craig, we're on this tangent, but I'm not like super James Bond like person or whatever, but he's my favorite one.
Yeah.
And he makes sense, and he can do both things. He can do the and this actually came up in conversation with someone this past weekend. Just randomly, is that yeah, he can like be rugged and all that shit, but he can also clean up. And so that's what that character needs to be. But going back to Stephen King, yeah, there's you get to a certain point where it's like there's that, and that's what Halloween also is it's nostalgic. Because so much of Halloween is childhood, especially for those of us who still had that era of the trick-or-treating and the neighborhoods, and you know, this year Halloween fell on the weekend, you know, me and Ghetto Boys are trick-or-treating, you know, because there's nothing like memories of robbing little kids for bags, or being a little kid. And my shit, and I'll say this every year if I need to, is going back home, like to my friend's house, and dumping out our candy on the floor to inspect it, because that was part of the process, and to inspect the candy and make sure, you know, quote unquote, that we didn't find any razor blades or needles or anything in the candy, but also like hoping that we would like obviously not eat one or fucking hurt ourselves, but like find one and be like, oh shit, like there's a fucking like killer pervert in the fucking neighborhood, like that's fucking crazy to do that. And we never did that, and that's good that there was never. I mean, that I'm sure there were perverts, killer ones, not that I know of, but we never. That's another version of that thing of like it's not Halloween enough. You know what I mean? Like there's just not. And I guess the metaphor for that is that some of these movies some of them have more razor blades and fucking needles embedded in them than others. And that's for each one of us to decide how that works. But they're out there, the ones that we haven't seen or we have, and it's been a while. The Mangler, Toby Hooper film that I'm like, ooh, what is that? You know? So it makes me excited to look forward to future Halloweens of talking about this, and even not like we don't have to limit it to we like to do it in the season, but it can go beyond that. But to look back at old shit that we've seen, that's kind of like what we do, is like to look back and to look forward and to get that mix, and to see what horror lies beneath and above us or in front of us. You know what I mean? So
absolutely. That's when you know that's when you know you have a rewarding film, where it's, you know, it gave you something when you were 5, 10 years old. It meant something different when you were 15, 18, 20s. And now as we're entering our later years, mid to late 40s, early 50s, what do these movies mean now? I'm at a point now, it's like I don't have a lot of time, but there's a part of me that wants to pick up The Shining and finally sit down and actually read it and see what the hell it was that set Stephen King off. Because I know what it is in theory, but without actually seeing the difference between the two, I don't know. But it'll also make watching Dr. Sleep a little bit different. Dr. Sleep was a film that I enjoyed.
Which we talked about.
Yeah, we did talk about that. Here's the thing with King. As much as I think the documentary King on Screen fails as far as a true study of King and his work, it did get me excited to see some of the films that I had never seen. And I think even for its failings, watching these people gush over Stephen King means there's something there that is enticing. There's something there that makes you want to gravitate towards him, and and see the world through his eyes for a little bit, because that's what literature basically is. You're seeing the world through one man or one woman's eyes. They're the author's vision of who we are as a species, the humanity or the lack thereof that we exhibit on a daily basis. And I think, from what I know from the adaptations of Stephen King, there is hope in the hopelessness. You know, his films tend to want to punish people in order to. He's kind of like Job. He's not Job. He's God, creating stories of Job. Let's see how much punishment these people can endure. Let's see what they can take based on either their greed, their short-sightedness, or just their lack of either empathy, sympathy, or awareness to what's going on around them. I think I'm getting a better, even having never read him, I'm getting a greater respect for him as a writer. And I hope that when I sit down to read some of his stuff, it will be rewarded as such. I don't know. I don't know if you've ever read anything of his. So, no, you said you did read Needful Things. That was the only one.
That was the only one, and I found myself kind of like, it's like, so I have Thomas Harris's Silence of the Lambs, right? Mm-hmm. So that one, if I go back to it, I have highlighted like the scenes with Lecter because those are the best scenes. Mm-hmm. So I noticed I go, like, having now read it, like if I want to revisit, I go directly to those scenes, but it's one that I can still read through the whole thing and enjoy it just as much.
Yeah.
That one I noticed, I read the whole thing and then I went back and I was just like, I enjoyed the scenes with the devil much more than anything else. And that was just in terms of that kind of, when I checked it out of the library for those couple weeks that I had it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's that. I mean, it's always different. It would be interesting to go to I would revisit that one before I looked at anything else, just because I would want to go back through that door. The documentary, it's like, don't necessarily tell me that Stephen King is more than horror. Like, I know that. Take me through the horror to the other side. And that's the beauty of Stephen King, is going through the horror to the other side of saying, oh, this is much more than that. And, with that, we'll see all of you motherfuckers on the other side as well. buymeacoffee.com/WatchRickRamos. Put some candy in our fucking bag, and we'll scare you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.